Welcome to the TCJ podcast, where we discuss curious, thought-provoking, and sometimes controversial ideas through the lens of biblical wisdom. I'm your host, Keith Wood. Today I'm with Dan Proctor, and Dan is first of all, a graduate of Trinity. He's also a veteran pastor, and he's the founder of Help for Hurting Pastors, as well as the church strengthening director in the Southeast region of Converge Ministries. And Dan, I'm so happy to have you here. Thank you for being here today.
It's great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I think that your ministry context is such an interesting one, and I'm excited to learn a little bit more about what you do. Specifically, you have a ministry that's supporting pastors. So let me ask you, in an ideal world, I think we would agree that a pastor is supposed to be a spiritual shepherd to his congregation. But does Scripture offer any guidelines for whether or how a pastor should be shepherded? In other words, do pastors have pastors?
Absolutely. I had a young man when I first started this ministry who, was kind of hurting, felt alone, and we grabbed lunch together. And he said, "I got a question for you." And I said, "What's that?" He said, "Will you be my pastor?" And I said, "Absolutely, I will be your pastor." And I'm actually, going to be with him this week again. So I think that it's very, just super important that every pastor have someone, I think, outside his congregation that's looking after him and supporting him, shepherding him. And I think that, a pastor is supposed to be able to teach others, but I think we both agree that in order to teach others, you have to be teachable. So I think it's very important.
Yeah, cool. Well, I know that you have your own ministry background, right? You were a pastor.
Yes.
How has your own personal journey as a pastor and other types of ministry that you've done shaped the mission of your ministry, with Help for Hurting Pastors and the work that you do with Converge?
Yeah, I trained here at Trinity, and I graduated from here in 1989, went to Daytona Beach and just stayed there. So I was 5 years as an assistant pastor. So I kind of know that side of the coin of working for someone. But then for 30 years, I was sitting in the lead chair. And I understand the pressures of ministry, particularly being in the lead chair. I think people forget that pastors are just people, right? And we have the same pressures and the same problems that everyone else in the church faces. Pastors, we can have marital problems, and we can have parenting challenges and depression and anxiety and addictions, insecurities, financial struggles. Pastors struggle with mental health disorders sometimes, physical problems. So everything that the people in our congregation are dealing with, pastors deal with. And then on top of that, you and your spouse are dealing with the burnout that can come from constantly pouring into other people's lives. That can be draining. The constant, staff and board issues where contention can arise. The weight of responsibility from speaking publicly week after week after week, and so many guys feeling like, man, I got to hit a home run every week, when I speak, and the preparation that goes into that, it can just be mentally and physically draining. And then I think too, it's that feeling of feeling like you're living in a glass house, and people kind of expect perfection out of you or out of your kids and your family. And a funny story I was reminded of this week is our son and his family had gotten a little puppy. So we met them and was looking at the puppy, and we were getting some pictures, and they put some of them on Facebook. And my wife was holding the puppy, and so her shirt had come up a little bit, and one of the church members said, "Yeah, I saw the picture of you with the puppy, and your belly was showing." It's like,
Yeah, thank you for that.
it's like, yep, I got a belly like everybody else, you know. But anyway, that's just kind of an example, though, of as a pastor living in a glass house, and they're examining these pictures on Facebook. And so my point is that those pressures can get to you after a while, and they can really drain you. So I think it's the reason you ask, what did my ministry experience? How does that come to bear on this? And I think it's pastors have to protect their emotional and their mental health. You can't do that in isolation. So it goes back to what you said at the beginning, how every pastor needs a pastor. You gotta, and we'll talk more about that as we go, but yeah, you can't do that in isolation. And I think a lot of pastors feel like they don't have anywhere to turn. And a lot of times there's no way your staff or your board understands what you're going through as a pastor. So anyway, that's why we started this ministry. And that's why we do what we do, and we travel all over Florida. And my week consists of meeting with pastors, day after day. Zoom calls, phone calls, in-person meetings. My days consist of just talking to pastors.
That's really cool. It sounds like a big part of that is that pastors have. It sounds like pastors have a hard time finding people who can relate to the problems that they're going through, at least if they're looking locally, right?
That's right.
So your ministry provides some of that relatability.
Exactly, because no one understands what you're going through unless you've been there. It's just one of those deals. People can try to understand, and they should try to understand, but they really don't truly understand until they've been there. And so anyway, that's why we resigned from pastoring after 30 years, is to help other pastors.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool. So. I think you already alluded to your answer to this next question a little bit, but what are some of the most common challenges that you see pastors facing today? And maybe even are there any emerging trends that you're noticing that, think post-2020, how has that shaped the landscape?
That is a tremendous question. Emerging trends. I'm in a different church almost every weekend now, either speaking or just supporting a guy, trying to help coach a guy or help a guy and kind of observe. And so for a couple of years being in different churches, I do see some emerging trends. One of the challenges I think post-COVID is regular church attendance used to mean one thing, and now it means something else. So I was reading some statistics on this where most pastors today consider a person a regular church attender if they come 1 or 2 times a month.
Wow.
Used to not be that way. Usually a regular church attender meant they came every week unless they were on vacation or sick, but that's not what that means. So let's say you want to have a church of 100. Now you almost got to have 200 or 300 on the books, right? Because they're not going to all be there every week. Post-COVID, people don't come every week. It's crazy, but it's definitely an emerging trend. I think that another positive emerging trend I see is that there's more emphasis now on the spiritual health of the church instead of just kind of raw numbers and attendance figures. I think that instead of just how many people are showing up on Sunday, more leaders are realizing, okay, are we healthy? Are we a healthy church? And so we have tools with Converge that we use to kind of come in and help guys assess their health.
Yeah, what are some of those things? That's interesting to me.
Yeah, well, one of the tools we use is called natural church development, and it comes from the heart of your people, which I love. It's not just a consultant coming in looking at things for a weekend. You actually meet with 30 key people in the church that are involved, right? That are involved in the church, not staff and not the pastor himself, but 30 people. And then they have a survey that they take. It's pretty lengthy. It only takes about 30 minutes to take it. And then they get back a really full, detailed drill down in 8 key categories of church health. 8 categories that are true of any church anywhere, no matter where you're at. These are 8 things that are kind of been proven to be signs of health of a church. And then you kind of get a score on each one of those. And then we help coach you through that. You form a team to help address those issues. So that's one of the things that we do.
So, I mean, do you know offhand what some of those key metrics are? I'm curious I think a lot of people listening to this might think, well, if you've got people who are attending regularly, that sounds like a healthy church to me, right? And so you're saying, well, actually, there's a little bit more to it than that. So, what would a couple of those things be?
I mean, I won't go through all 8, but
Yeah.
empowering leadership. You know,
Okay.
in other words, you're training up other leaders. You're not keeping everything close to the vest. But another one is people gift-based ministry, we call it, where people feel like they're serving in their sweet spot.
Okay.
And they feel like they're being able to use their gifts in the church. Another one is holistic small groups. You know, do you have a healthy small group structure in your church where people can get connected? Another one is has to do with you know, a spirit-filled worship. That has kind of more to do with Sunday morning, the worship experience that people are having. Is it truly drawing them near to God? That's one of the things that we look at. So yeah, there's 8 of those in all, and they receive like I said, they even get a detailed drill down on every single question on the survey and what their score is on that question. So if they're looking at, say, holistic small groups and that's their low area, why is it their low area? Then they get a drill down on every question. So
Wow.
it's really helpful.
Yeah,
I do
that's
that
cool.
for a lot of churches. I go in and we do this health survey, and it seems to help guys a lot.
That's cool. So yeah, so 2020 shifted the focus in terms of what does a healthy church look like.
Yes. You know, we're talking about worship. I think it's interesting too. A couple of things I've noticed. You know, I think that one of the things I've noticed is that pastors in churches have kind of gotten away from people actually looking into their Bibles, and we just kind of spoon feed everyone on the screen, right? I think pastors are realizing that was a mistake. People, if it's on the screen, people don't bring their Bibles to church typically. But now I think we're realizing that was a mistake, and so pastors, like I was at a conference, and a 35-year-old pastor in San Diego who's got a thriving church out there. He's got probably 1,000 Gen Zers that come on Sunday night.
Wow.
And 85-90% of them all have a Bible in their lap. And I asked him about that. And he said, that's on purpose. I want them bringing their Bible. That's their lifeline, is their Bible. So I want them to be comfortable with that. And so he said, when people come and they don't have a Bible and they look around and 5 of their friends all have a Bible, then they bring a Bible the next week. And so he's created this culture, which we had also done at our church, of we bring our Bibles to church, we look at them, we check out the pastor and make sure it's what he's saying is really here. So I'm kind of seeing it. I said, well, then do you put the Bible on the screen? He said, no, because he said, if I put it up there, they won't bring their Bible. So that he intentionally does that. I'm seeing more of that now. Another thing is, I think we had gotten to the point where we'd kind of taken worship away from the average person. And it was kind of like, come to church and watch the worship band, watch the professionals on stage, and 80% of the church isn't singing. They're just kind of watching. I'm seeing a trend now going back to, hey, let's sing songs that are singable. Let's get the congregation engaged. Let's make sure they're being part of this worship experience. They're not just watching somebody else. And I'm seeing that come back now to where worship leaders are realizing we've got to get the congregation engaged in this. We've got to get them worshiping God and Jesus. So I think those are all positive things.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
I think there's a greater emphasis, another trend, on community engagement and social justice. Which goes back to the Gen Zers. That 18 to 30-year-old demographic are looking for 2 things. They're looking for faith practices that are immediately relevant to their life, and they're looking for faith practices that positively impact the world around them. So they're not just kind of like into theology for the sake of theology. They want something that's going to impact their life, but then positively impact the people around them. So they're wanting topics that include mental health, questions and doubts about God, identity and purpose, social justice, environmental issues, gender and racial equality. These are things that your Gen Zers are looking for, and I think a lot of churches are addressing those things now and realizing if we're going to reach the next generation, we're going to have to, they're not going to just study doctrine for the sake of doctrine for head knowledge. They want to know, how does this impact my life? So I'm seeing that, and of course AI is a emerging trend that with questions swirling on that, especially when it comes to pastors. Over-reliance on AI for sermon prep. What's that going to do to a pastor's spiritual formation himself? Is it going to hinder him from having an ability to have a deeper connection with God's Word, with people? Ethical concerns about plagiarism, laziness, letting, because there's a big difference between using AI to salt and pepper your message versus actually prepare 90% of it, And so I do think that that's something that the church is trying to figure out and address right now. Where does AI fit into this? So anyway.
It sounds like a lot of the challenges that you've talked about are challenges associated with progress, actually, that the church is kind of figuring out how worship ought to look. And, we've got these tools in things like AI, and that creates a lot of opportunity, but how do we navigate that? Right. So is a big portion of your job in terms of helping pastors, is it helping them navigate progress and know how to be successful with all these new trends? Trends is a rough word, but I think you know what I mean.
No, that's exactly what that is. A lot of what I do, I would call coaching. Mm-hmm. I'm not trying to dictate. Every church is different. Every pastor is unique. We in Converge, we're a movement of churches. We are a gospel-centered, big umbrella. Like, we're not trying to cookie cut and have all the churches be the same. Mm-hmm. When you're part of the Converge movement, you're part of a movement that very much values churches have to have their own DNA, right? Mm-hmm. Of course, it all's rooted in Scripture, but they have to have their own DNA, and the way that looks is going to be different. So helping pastors to navigate through that, figure out what is our church's DNA, mm-hmm. how can we best capitalize on that to reach people for Christ, and so when you're coaching, it's different than consulting, because in coaching you're really asking questions and helping mm-hmm. draw the answers out of them. You're not just as a consultant coming and saying, this is what you need to do and this is what you need to do. Yeah. So most of mine is coaching. I'm coaching guys, trying to help them think through things and how it applies to their life and their ministry.
Yeah, that's cool. I think that paints a clear picture. I'm going to shift gears a little bit. I want to ask, in your experience, how large a factor does a pastor's spouse and family play in situations of hurt, where things go wrong for pastors?
I would say it's extremely interwoven, your family. I mean, so many times I've seen guys that they could carry on, but their wife can't. Their spouse can't. They're just done. I'm thinking of an example right now. Had a pastor tell me I could probably go, he's older, but he's like, I could go another 5 to 7 years, but my wife's done. She's done. And so I think that it plays a big part, a really, really big part in that. If you're not healthy at home, then it's going to be very hard to pastor long haul, to have a long view. So that's why I tell guys all the time, man, you've got to realize that your family is your number one ministry, and you have got to spend time at home. You've got to spend time with your kids. You got to spend time with your family. I mean, I went home every day when I pastored for 30 years. Most of those years I had kids at home, and every day I was leaving the office. And the pastor's work's never done, so you could stay there all night. But I was leaving the office at 4 or 5 o'clock, heading home to my family and spending time with my kids, because I knew that was so important. Well,
So maybe suppose someone's listening to this, they consider themselves a layperson in the church, and they want to know, well, how should I view my relationship to the pastor's family? How can I treat a pastor's family in such a way that is going to kind of be respectful of them and not place unfair expectations on them? What would you say to a person like that who's trying to figure out what's the appropriate sort of posture toward the pastor's family?
I think that pastors would be able to go a lot longer at churches, and like I went 30 years at the same church, and I think that the average tenure of a pastor is what, 2.5 to 4 years, something like that, and he's gone. And I think that if the church, number one, they have to accept that the pastor's role is difficult. They got to understand that and accept that. I think number two, they have to have a plan to support the pastor. So I think that's very important that they support him and his family. I think educating the church on how difficult that is, and then explaining, I think like if you have a board and they explain to the church, hey, here's how we're going to support our pastor, and then let that filter through the DNA of the church, is that we are going to love our pastor. We're going to love and support his family. We're going to be intentional about it. We're going to be, and I think most churches aren't intentional about it, and I think that that's very, very important. This was a shocking statistic to me. Half of those who left the ministry left it. They didn't just change churches. They left the ministry. Half of them said that their church was not doing any of the kinds of things that would help.
Wow.
So, I mean, the church can support the pastor and his family in thousands of ways, but I think the most important thing is be there for them when they're broken or hurting. Have conversations with him. Hey, how can we help? How can we support you? Because that's going to look different for every guy. How can we support you, Pastor? How can we help? Caring for their practical needs, finding ways that they can minister to their family. I think those are some of the ways you can show the pastor that you care.
Suppose that, let me just ask it this way. Are there any signs that congregations or fellow leaders in a church should be watching for that might indicate that a pastor's struggling in silence?
Conversations. So nothing can replace conversations. So I think that the only way to know if a pastor is struggling is having conversations. So, breaking bread together, doing things with them, maybe invite them to your house, maybe invite them to go do an activity and hang out and really find out how he's doing. You're never going to, warning signs would be if the pastor won't do any of that. He won't get coffee with you. He won't go to lunch with you. He doesn't want his family to get with other. I think if a pastor gets withdrawn, that's a warning sign. Because healing is impossible in loneliness. It's the opposite of loneliness. The number one contributing factor that creates issues for those in ministry is isolation. So I think that the key is if a pastor is isolating himself, there's probably depression going on. There's probably problems there. And you and I both know that pain that's suffered alone feels very different than pain that's suffered alongside another person. So when another person shares that pain with you, it makes all the difference in the world. I think isolation, is the pastor very difficult to even get coffee with. Those are some warning signs to look for if he's in a shell.
Yeah, no, that's. I think those are great practical things to look for. That's great. Maybe relatedly, in your experience, is it more common for church members to err on the side of being overbearing or too standoffish toward their pastor? Because I totally could see it being both ways. What's your experience with that?
Yeah. I think probably the tendency is for church members to err on the side of being too standoffish.
Well,
So yeah, not engaging the pastor enough. And again, you're right. You can definitely cross over into that overbearing side where you expect too much. Expecting a pastor to come over to your house once a week or something,
Right,
it gets overbearing. But no, I think that most people, the pastor's busy.
Yeah.
So they don't talk to him. They never send him a text. They never say, hey, and one of the things is, instead of just saying, even a text that says, hey, that was a great message, that's helpful, but it's even more helpful to a pastor if you tell them how it helped you.
Yeah.
That's one little tidbit I could give to anyone listening to this, that you want to encourage your pastor. Yeah, tell them great message, but tell them why it was a great message.
That's great.
Tell them how it helped you, how the message helped you specifically. That will really encourage
That's
your
really
pastor.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can totally see. I mean, I teach, and I could definitely imagine if a student came up and said something like that to me, that'd be like, oh wow, that's great.
Yeah, because then it puts handlebars on it. How did it help you? So, because as a pastor, you get people who, that was a great message, and you almost feel like they have to say that, right?
Yep.
But if they say, no, here's how it helped me, then it's like, wow.
Hard to argue with that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yes.
That's really good. Okay, let's talk about the work that you do. Can you walk us through what it looks like when a pastor reaches out to you, whether it's Help for Hurting Pastors or the work that you do with Converge? What sort of support do you offer and your ministry offer, and what can someone expect from the process of reaching out to your ministry?
Yeah, that's a great question. No, I think that for us, it starts with conversations. I know I've mentioned that a couple times now, but in this digital age that we live in, texting's great. I do it all the time. Email is great. All that's great, but I'm going to tell you, nothing replaces face-to-face conversations. And so I think that so if a guy reaches out to me through Converge, through my Converge affiliation, or through just my website, first thing I'm going to do is have a conversation. I had a guy reach out to me. First thing I did is schedule a Zoom call, because he's in another state. There was no way we could sit down and have coffee, but we could do a Zoom. And so, we did a Zoom and had a conversation. Man, he said, could we do this with your wife and my wife next time? I'm like, sure. So all four of us did a Zoom, and we could see each other and see the facial expressions and see the hurt or the pain, or you bring up a topic and you can see in their face, oop, okay.
There's something there.
Yeah. So first thing we're going to do is have conversations, because they're so crucial. From the conversation, find out what the need is. And for every guy, it's different. So find out what the need is. Is it marriage issues? Is it discouragement, depression, anxiety? Is it church issues? Man, I feel like I'm hitting a brick wall at church with some issues. I don't know what to do. So once we find out what those issues are, then we come alongside them and help them with whatever it is. We don't want them to feel isolated. We don't want them to feel alone. Books are great. I love books. But how often do you get to actually talk face-to-face with the author of the book, right? Yeah. Not very often. Online seminars, great. We offer those. We do those. Those are great. But sometimes, you know what? Nothing takes the place of having a living, breathing person with a pulse on the other side of the table with you to talk to you. So that's what we offer. That's what we do. And in Converge, we tell our pastors, you can lead alone if you want to, because in Converge, we never dictate. We don't, we're there to come alongside and help. So we don't dictate to churches what to do. They're all autonomous. So we say you can lead alone if you want to, but we hope you choose not to, because we're truly better together. And I think that every pastor, whether he realizes it or not, is in need of 3 key relationships for our own soul care. Those 3 key relationships in the life of a pastor are: you need peers, friends that are at the same stage of life that you can learn from, share life with, We have what we call together groups in regions that meet once a quarter to let pastors get together with their peers. So I'm all over. So in a couple weeks, I'll have a together group in Miami. Then I'll do one in Orlando. Then I'll do one in Tampa, St. Pete. We have one here in Jacksonville. We're kicking off a brand new one in Fort Myers. Just gets guys together with peers.
Yeah.
But then the second relationship every pastor needs is a coach. You know, nobody wants to navigate church and ministry life alone. So a coach can bring comfort and help, guidance as you meet regularly once a month with your coach. And then every pastor needs a counselor. A trusted person that you can kind of unpack what's happening beneath the surface in your heart, in your personal life. It may be a professional, clinical counselor or therapist. It may just be someone that you trust that's a little ahead of you in life, that's very wise, but everyone needs a counselor. We have a MAP program, Minister Assistance Program with Converge, where we pay up to $100 a session for pastors, and they choose their counselor or therapist.
Wow.
We pay $100 a session for up to 12 sessions a year because we just know how important it is for pastors to be healthy. So yeah, having that counselor or therapist that you can kind of unpack what's going on beneath the surface. So anyway, those are the three key relationships. Peers, you need a coach, ministry coach, and then you need someone that like a counselor or therapist that you can really unpack what's going on beneath the surface.
Those are really cool opportunities. By the time a pastor has reached out to you, do you find that they're typically pretty self-aware in terms of the issues that they're dealing with, and they're kind of bringing it to you and say, this is my problem, solve it? Or is it, something seems right, or something doesn't seem right, rather. Can you help me figure out what's going on?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah, both. I think that sometimes guys know exactly what the problem is. And they're like, man, I have a board member that is out of sorts, and they just need some coaching on how to fix that. Sometimes it's another church issue. Sometimes it's, man, I'm having problems with some out of sorts church members, or I'm having marriage problems, or I'm having problems with my teenage child, or they know what it is. But then other times guys are just like really depressed, or they're having just mental health and emotional health issues, and they really don't know why. They don't know if it's burnout. They don't know what it is. And so we kind of help them. We ask questions to kind of help draw out of them and figure out what's going on.
Yeah. That's cool. And I mean, I can see how the relationship you talked about, a coach, a counselor, can address those different types of issues.
Right, so exactly. Sometimes you just need a peer to talk to, to kind of unpack how you're feeling. Other times, no, I need to do a deep dive. I need a counselor or a therapist. And then other times it's more just a coach, someone who can kind of coach me through whatever situation it is. So that's why I say all three of those are important.
Yeah, that's cool. Do you ever encounter pastors who aren't sure if they're hurting enough to ask for help? What would you say to a pastor who's unsure whether they're at a stage where they need to reach out? Are there any small but practical steps that someone could take to move towards healing from wherever they're at?
Yes, I think that we all have down days in the ministry, right? You guys do, right? You all have days probably where you just feel down and you just feel discouraged. That's different. We all have that. That's completely normal. We all have those Mondays where we're like, man, I don't know if I want to keep doing this. Perfectly normal. Everyone has those. I laugh because when I pastored for 30 years, I had periods where I was like wanting to leave and go do something different. And my wife's like, she was the voice of reason. So my wife's like, honey, here we know what our problems are. If we go take another church, granted, there's going to be problems. We just don't know what they are at the other church. But at least here we know what our problems are. I'm like, man, that's a great point. At least here we know our problems. Go somewhere else, you don't know what your problems are. But there's going to be problems wherever you go. So, but I think that if a guy is in that funk, right? He's just in that state of depression and it's lingering. It's not just like, oh, I'm having a bad day. It's lingering on and on and on. Then I think that's a sign he really needs to reach out. But I will say this, if a guy will put in place the three things we talked about, if he's got peer friends, if he's got a counselor or a therapist he sees regularly, and he's got a coach he's meeting with once a month, then I think that will answer that question for him.
Yeah.
It's when we're on an island all by ourselves.
Right. So he's got to be having the conversations, and that'll come out.
Yes, conversations are huge because, again, reading a book's helpful, but it's not the same as having live conversations.
I have a suspicion that I know your answer to this next question, but I'll ask it anyway. We'll see.
All right.
What's
Go for it.
What's one piece of advice, if you could give one piece of advice to somebody who's in seminary, who's looking at going into ministry, what's the piece of advice that you would give to them in preparation for their lifetime in ministry?
I would say, first of all, that make sure that you are providing soul care for yourself. And again, we've talked about what that looks like, so I'm not going to rehash that. But make sure that you are providing the things necessary for your own soul care. A lot of pastors do not do that. There's not a lot of self-care, soul care going on. And I would say, secondly, is that make sure that you are not spending too much time at church. Make sure you're spending time with your family. I think that's kind of what really helped balance me out and allow me to do what I did for so many years, is that I think some guys work like crazy. They don't spend time with their family, so they're not getting that balance. And they think a sabbatical once every 5 years is going to solve that, or they think a vacation once a year will solve that, and it won't. You have to maintain a healthy balance in your life daily. Daily, you have to have a healthy balance, week after week after week. You've got to have that balance. And yes, work hard, but play hard. You know, spend time having fun with your family. You know, God's for that. You know, right? God wants us to enjoy our life and enjoy our family, and not, you know, God had those built-in times, right, for Israel in the Old Testament. And he had that built-in Sabbath day, and they had those festivals, and they had those celebrations, basically big parties. And so they had that balance kind of woven into the fabric of their life in the Old Testament. And I get it. We're not under the law. We're under grace. But I think common sense tells us we need to do something similar to that. You need to be taking those days off every week. You need to be spending time with your family every day. And I think that would be the advice.
And there are strong words in the Bible for people who don't take care of their family well, right?
That's right. That's exactly right. It's got to be a priority. And it helps us maintain that equilibrium that we need.
That's great. So that was the seminary student. My last question for you is, what's one thing that you hope your listeners who are, again, average church member, they want to be a good church member, what's one piece of advice that you would give to that person that they can take away from this?
Your pastor is not Superman. He doesn't have all the gifts. He's like you. He's got one or two gifts. And of nine, however many you count, 9 or 10 team gifts that the Holy Spirit gives, your pastor's got one or two. So he's not going to be good at everything. He's not going to be spiritual Superman. Your pastor is a human being with struggles just like everybody else. He needs ministry just like you need ministry. And so I think the advice I would give to church members is to remember that your pastor is human. He's limited in gifting, limited in energy, limited in self-knowledge. And I think we have to respect the fact that our pastor is limited. He has needs, and he cannot be everything for everybody. You know, when I pastored, I had gifts that I was good at and I could excel. I had areas I wasn't good at. And so I had to have people come alongside me that were good at those things to do that. And I think sometimes it's hard for church members to accept that. They want their pastor to be good at all everything, you know. And so I think that, you know, me, I had the gift of exhortation, rallying people, encouraging people, you know, especially corporately. But then like mercy shower gift, that wasn't strong for me. So I would have to have help with that, you know, visiting the hospitals, visiting the nursing homes. A pastor can't be good at everything. He may have the gift of teaching, but he may not be a very good administrator, you know, but he may be good at administration, but he's not good at this over here. So I think that's the main thing is church members just need to remember that their pastor's human.
Yeah, that's really good. I mean, the Christian life has never been about self-sufficiency, right? And I think it's easy to think, well, I know I'm not supposed to be self-sufficient, right? But the pastor, he's different. He should have the whole package.
Right.
Yeah. Well, Dan Proctor, I really appreciate you being here. You've shared some great insight as well as practical information that I think you know, we could put to action. So I really appreciate that. To those of you who have been listening, I hope that you've enjoyed the conversation, and I hope that you'll enjoy joining us next time.